Hey everyone, my name is Daisha Jones and I am with Engage, Inspire, Expect, Inform. And my husband and I also own a nonprofit, Expeditions in Education. And we're so excited to partner with Teaching the Hudson Valley and writing some STEM content for them. I want to preface this webinar by sharing my philosophy of STEM. So we know that the acronym stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And those are the jobs that we want to prepare our students for when they finish school. However, as a STEM educator in the K-12 world, what we really want to do is connect the real world to the right now so kids can see the careers they can have when they finish school. So we want to integrate the collaboration skills, critical thinking, communication, creativity into everything that we teach so that kids can find their place in this world. So with that, I'm going to share. And let's start looking into teaching the Hudson Valley. So we have 4 places that we're going to visit. The format for each of the places is like this. There will be a STEM challenge connected to a real world problem that is affected in this particular place that we're studying. And they'll also be connected to the UN Global Sustainability Goals. There will be 12 lesson immersions, which means these are going to be short tasks that you can use throughout your entire unit of content. We are not preparing these lessons to teach the content to your kids, but to show your kids how they can use the content in real world. And then there will be a STEM challenge at the end that connects the arts. Now remember, our version of STEM is the real world meets the right now. You'll see that. Our first place to visit was Hudson River, your namesake. So we chose waterway STEM for this one, asking kids to look at water power. Each of the lesson immersions that we chose are within the content of science, math, history, and literacy. And then we broke those up into a K-5, 6-8, and 9-12 band. Within each of those, except for literacy, and we'll look at that in just a few minutes, we have this broken up into content, vocabulary, questions, and a task. So the content is going to be based on New York standards. However, if you are using this content outside of New York, you are going to find great connections to what you teach also. There will be some vocabulary words that kids can link to, some questions that can drive your instruction. And while you're teaching this whole idea of what plants need, this is a task that you can use. In 6-8, we go from learning about the plant to designing a container for the plant that will allow them to take away some of the attributes that a plant needs to see if it can continue to grow. And in 9-12, we take an actual problem that Hudson River is facing, and we decide how we would solve that problem. And in this case, it would be invasive species. In math, again, we're not teaching the content, but we're showing how the content looks in the real world. So for this one, kids are going to be building a boat. In 6-8, they're going to be researching the blue crab industry and creating humane traps. In 9-12, they're going to be calculating the area, volume, and mass of 3 bodies of water, which means they're going to be using data that they can quantify and qualify, and then they're going to be sharing their findings with the USGS. In history, we're going to stay a little bit with animals, so we're going to be researching the animals and creating picture maps. In 6-8, we're going to be creating an actual map of the Hudson River from its origin to the completion. And in 9-12, we will extend that learning to topographical maps. In literacy, you're going to see the page change up just a little bit. We're going to have a literature section, a connections section, and then strategies. So for K-5 Hudson River, we found Picturing America and River of Dreams to be amazing books. We also met a a friend of Hudson Talbot's last night on our webinar, which was very exciting. For 6-8, we're going to talk about Captain Sully. And although this happened on the Hudson River in New York, many, many Americans experienced it that day. And then for 9-12, we're going to make some cultural and heritage connections by looking at the book Canoeing with the Cree. And then also looking at a journal from two men that recreated that journey. We will include 2 writing prompts at the end of each content piece. Now, these writing prompts will be open-ended with the same questions. What do you see? What do you know? And what do you wonder? So I call this strategy Picture This, where you just put up a photo or an image and you have kids just think and wonder and share. We've also included an arts piece for each of these. So there'll be a STEM challenge connected to the arts. And we're going to be researching this one at the paintings of Thomas Cole. And we're going to learn a little bit about the Hudson River School. In the Catskills, we have chosen forestry. So our STEM challenge will be about forestry and how kids can learn about forest degradation, talk about illegal logging, and then create their own virtual field trip to a local park or forest. Now, obviously, if they live near the Hudson River, they can visit the Catskills and collect photographs to create or invent their virtual field trip. But this is also a great place for students to showcase where they live and to be proud of where they live and to create a virtual field trip that others can enjoy. We're going to talk about animals in the Catskills. We're going to talk about ecosystems and interdependence. We're going to talk about the different types of interactions that happen between organisms and an ecosystem. And then for 9-12, we're going to move it a little further and talk about the human impact in the Catskills on the environment. In the math world, we're going to do some measuring and observation and classifying. So first, we're going to take on the role of a phenologist, and we're going to count trees. In 6-8, we're going to talk about the plants that you would find in the Catskills or where you live, and then design and create a marketable trail mix that includes some of the ingredients found in those native plants. And in 9-12, we're going to investigate the career of a forester, and we're going to teach kids how they can measure the heights of trees without ever climbing them. In history, we're going to be looking at farming and food and sustainable growing techniques. So we're going to read about the Hawthorne Farm, and we're going to talk about what we had for dinner and can we trace it back to its origin. In 6-8, we're going to be researching farm food organizations in the Catskills. We're going to reach out to these organizations and ask for a phone interview, see what their mission is, see if it aligns with a mission that we may have, look more into nonprofits. And for 9-12, we're going to be watching a video entitled Ugly Food. And we want kids to really be thinking about how our impact or our interactions with each other and the environment impact the entire world. And how can we reduce food waste? In literacy, we're choosing a book from my childhood. I love the mountains. So this song was very special to me growing up in a camp situation. So we thought we would look back to this familiar camp song and see how we can look at it now and learn about rhythm and the scheme of the verses and also the ecosystem. We're going to be looking at My Side of the Mountain. This is a Jean Craighead George book written back in the 60s, but just a really time-honored classic. And once you've read My Side of the Mountain, you can go to On the Far Side of the Mountain and Frightful's Mountain, and just really look about how Sam's character evolves over time. And for 9-12, we're taking it old school again with Rip Van Winkle. 2 writing prompts. And then our arts challenge this time is to write a short film based on the scenery and the forestry that you find in the Catskills. Now we know that there have been several movies filmed there, and this has also been the inspiration for other films. So we're going to ask kids to write a short film based on the Catskills or a similar area in their community. We've linked some resources. We're going to encourage them that they can use phones for their filming, or iPads or tablets, or just a regular video camera. We want them to share this with a local author or screenwriter when they finish. Next, we go to Shawangunk, and we're going to talk about archaeology. So this actual STEM challenge is going to connect to Goal 11, protecting the world's cultural and natural heritage. So there are several historical buildings and locations that we find in Shawangunk, but we also want kids to think of other places that probably deserve that historical designation and create reasons why. In our science, we're going to be talking about glaciers, how they move. We're going to be talking about sea level rise and how that's affecting the area. And then we're going to be talking about the models based on our research of the glacier activity that took place nearly 27,000 years ago. In math, we're going to stay with the water and ice for just a little bit and talk about the shaping of the rock. So we're going to do some measuring and weighing and talk about how weight and mass are different. We're then going to take on the role of a Discovery Channel film producer, and we're going to research the rock formations. And then we're going to talk about how filmmaking is related to mathematics. And for 9-12, we're going to create one of my favorite science things, and that is glacial ice made out of flubber. So we're going to be measuring the weight and the mass of the glacial ice. We're going to be creating simulations to make this glacier ice move. And we're going to be filming that so we can take that to a time graph and a motion graph. In the history, we're going to talk about George Washington and where he stayed when he was in this area. We're going to look at the historical timeline of Shawangunk, and we're going to be creating a photo story of these events. And we're also going to share that without these events, the history would have changed. And for the 9-12, we are going to take on the role of a curator. So we're going to be opening up our own museum in downtown Rondeau. And we're going to be choosing 15 to 20 artifacts that will tell the story. Again, if your students are looking at this and they don't live near this area or in another state, they can choose an historical site near them to create their artifacts. In literacy, we're going to be talking about the archaeologists dig for clues in K5. In 6-8, we're going to look at Accidental Archaeologists, which is a fascinating book, even for adults, because it talks about the many exciting accounts of archaeological discoveries around the world. And in 9-12, we're going to be actually reading Tales from Shawangunk, which is a memoir, and it's just a compilation of stories that describe the adventure and struggle that contributed to the beginnings of the Shawangunk Nature Preserve. 2 more writing prompts. And then our STEM arts challenge for this one is to investigate the endurance races that take place in Shawangunk, especially the one called Rock the Ridge. And then we're going to ask kids to create their own endurance race that has some historical and scientific significance. We want them to map it out in their community, to talk to community leaders and local people in charge of traffic to see if this would be a good route for their race. We want them to create stops on the race where they can stop and learn more about the history of the area, and then give their race a name, a purpose, a map, and directions, and then advertise it, and possibly even move it to be an annual event that raises money for charity. And then our last place-based experience is the Palisades. So we went with a geology STEM, and we also connected it to Frank Lloyd Wright, the American architect and educator that created housing and buildings that matched nature. For science, we're going to be talking about dirt and observations and identifying different objects. We're going to be talking about the fossil dinosaur that was unearthed there in 1909. And we're going to be advocating for a paleontological dig. That's a hard word to say. I can say paleontologist, so I should be able to say paleontological. I think I did it that time. Dig for dinosaur bones. We're going to be researching the cost for this dig and see if we can convince a local museum to have one there. For math, we're going to take on some of the fun things you can do in the Palisades. So we're going to be talking about boating. We're going to do some fishing and talk about the fishing regulations there and turn that into an engineering project where they're going to design an aquarium. And then for 9-12, we're going to be hired by the New York Wildlife Department to design an aviary, but we're going to design it in the form of a geodesic dome, which will tie to our geometry standards. For history, we're going to bring in the famous Palisades Amusement Park, which was very fascinating to read about. We're going to talk about the controversy behind the Hudson River sloop Clearwater. And we're going to look at the Civil War, and we're going to look at the signs that were advertising patent medicines. For literacy, our book is I'm Trying to Love Rocks, which is a very special book to me because I love to collect rocks with my grandson. And he is 5 years old now, and we have a collection of rocks in our front yard. So when he comes, he likes to look at the new rocks that we found. For 6-8, we've moved a little bit out of historical fiction and realistic fiction, and we've moved into science fiction. So Chronal Engine is the book that we're going to be reading. And for 9-12, we're going to dig into Palisades Park, which we're encouraging you to read first, but then maybe implementing this book club into your classroom discussions. We want them to particularly look for character traits and decision points in the book. We have several beautiful photos from the area that we want them to use for their writing prompts. And for our STEM Arts Challenge, it's a little bit different because we are going to be looking at the science, but we want them to research this in such a way that it has an arts feel to it. So we know that in the Palisades that skiing is a very big deal. So they're being hired by local community members who need to get the ice melted off the roads as soon as possible so they can keep the ski slopes open. So we want them to research types of materials that can keep the roads open and then prepare a report that shares this research by presenting it to the Palisades community. And remembering that they want to keep those ski slopes open for their economy, but they also want to keep people safe. So using a really cool multimedia presentation to share this information. So I hope you enjoyed this STEM content. I do want you to remember that these are jumping off points for you. So I hope that as you read through these immersion tasks, that you see opportunity to use these in your classroom or possibly use these in different ways. It may have given you an idea of how you can create immersion tasks in your room to provide an experience for your students. And once you've provided an experience, then you can make a connection for all of your standards that the state says that you need to teach. Because remember, if we don't connect the real world to the right now, the kids are going to constantly add, why do we have to do this? Reach out to Teaching Hudson Valley for more information, and this information will be up on the website. And I can't wait to see what you learn and what your kids experience as you travel teaching the Hudson Valley. Thanks and have a great day.